Hi everyone, welcome. I'm out here in my yard, and usually it's the outdoor worm bag that we're feeding, but today we're also going to take a quick check-in on the compost barrel first. And some of you might already be suspecting why. Something I've hinted at now a couple times. Usually the main reason for coming into the compost barrel is because we're looking to recruit some worms to join in with the ones that already live in the compost bag or the outdoor worm bag. Ooh, look at all these worms coming up to hang out in that little puddle that formed from all that rain that we got yesterday. Right before the camera started rolling, there was a little piece of paper right there, which might have contributed to that piece of that little puddle there remaining rather than it being able to vanish. So some worms took it upon themselves to come up and take a little bath in that puddle. So we're gonna look at this over here too, a whole bunch of them, even between the even between the layers of the cardboard. This piece of cardboard is just loaded with worms all over the place in between the multiple layers of the stuff. And that's good, because the reason we're in here is to recruit worms, and I wasn't quite sure how far I would have to rummage to round up volunteers for this project. I would like to just come in here and take a few handfuls to fill up my little plastic container and hopefully bring as little stuff as possible. You can see I was picking some clover and some dandelion and some crabgrass, doing some weeding, and that went in right on top of the typical kitchen scraps that are normally the main fare in here. And I'm already seeing a pretty good sized wad of worms hanging out here in between a few of these corn cobs. So I'm thinking we might as well start grabbing volunteers as soon as we start seeing them. And I wasn't looking to go too crazy collecting volunteers, but I wouldn't mind getting a good number of them here today. We've definitely hinted at the idea numerous times, and it is always interesting to check in to see how things in this system are progressing. And it does seem like we did hit a few hot spots with a lot of worms hanging out in them. It would be kind of nice if we could do the same, bump into a few more similar locations where there's just a whole bunch of worms collecting for whatever reason. You might have noticed I was attempting to bring along minimal extra material with the worms, just so we can get a somewhat decent view of how many worms we're bringing over, because something I like to do in my videos is to turn to you guys, the viewers, to provide me with your estimates of how many worms you think I'm putting into one of my systems. And these worms that we collect here today are going to be placed into the neighboring system, the outdoor worm bag. I didn't even take note of how many worms we thought we had originally launched that system with 104 days ago, I believe. We had just missed the 100-day-old turning point for that outdoor system a few days ago, but it's been raining here. That's the reason there was a big puddle when we first came in. And I've just been unable to spend any time outside much, just because of all the rain. It seems like I've been rummaging here, getting hardly any worms whatsoever. I suppose, regardless of how much extra stuff comes along for the ride, perhaps I should just grab any sort of little chunks of material that appear to have some worms in them. And I'll do my best just to show it on the camera, just so your estimates can be well informed. Oops, feels like I just dropped something. Oh no, that was just the that little piece of wood that was sort of serving as a paperweight on top of the cardboard covering. So here too, a mass of material that's got some worms hanging out in it. I thought that if it was possible, I would just try to leave as much stuff behind as possible and bring over worms only. But here it's difficult, you know, because there's just always so much stuff, and the worms are just all over the place within the stuff, exploring it, enjoying it. And you can see you don't have to go very far to get to material that is already pretty heavily broken down, composted material. So this system's probably been running this way. It was reset about maybe a year and a half ago, I believe, when I was compelled to make repairs because it was starting to break apart. So I unloaded it. We actually started out by unloading it into a couple of fabric grow bags, or at least most of the really finished material into some fabric grow bags, which ended up down in my wormery. And then we ended up actually keeping the worms downstairs in my wormery and adopting them as part of the wormery worms. But now for the past year and a half, whatever worms did remain out here have probably been busy reproducing. You can see all kinds of corn husks, even some old bamboo. This one piece of bamboo is really impressive how big it is. I guess the one big benefit to what we're doing here is that all the material sort of gets tilled up and stirred around. So a lot of the freshly added stuff will get mixed in with some pretty heavily broken down material. Here too, I'm not sure what this material was when I placed it in here. It might have just been some sort of weeds or something. I don't really remember. But this stuff seemed like it had a good number of worms hanging out in it. They blend in pretty good, so I'm just trying to give everyone a view of the number of worms occupying this stuff. Not even so sure we need to go very overboard in trying to recruit a massive number of worms, although sometimes I do try to come close to filling up this container just because it is a good sized container, and hey, why not, right? If we could bring over a lot of worms, then why not? And I think that this system just has a lot of worms in it in general, so it can certainly stand to, you know, lose a few worms, because there's certainly more remaining to take care of working this material down in the system. And it is always fun in the summertime because it's almost impossible to see the level of this system grow. It always just seems to always be vanishing as quickly as I could pile stuff in here, whether it's large amounts of kitchen scraps, whether it's debris from the garden, weeds, or whatever. It does always seem like, in the summertime at least, the material in this bin just gets gobbled up very quickly by its inhabitants. And the one thing though this year that I've not really seen much of, and I've been looking to see if I could see some sign of them, but perhaps this year I just don't get the benefit of also having black soldier fly larvae in my compost barrel helping with the composting efforts. Because once those guys move into your composting system, they're a little bit gross, so if you haven't really dealt with them in the past and you suddenly see a bunch of creepy looking little kind of worm looking things, you might be taken aback by them. But once you realize what incredible composters they are, you'll definitely appreciate having them in your system. And if you did happen to spot any of them while I've been rummaging around here, I'd love to hear about it. So please make a comment and let me know if I missed it, and maybe even include some sort of an index of the time point where they were seen. And I would love to review the video. Maybe when I'm editing it though, I'll be able to take a more close look at what's going on here and possibly catch what I'm missing here. It is getting a little bit later in the day than I would normally be out here doing this stuff, so the light's not as good as it could be. Hopefully the video turns out okay. But you know, I'm starting to wonder if we even need to go much further in terms of recruiting more worms. We've got a good number of worms over here. Every handful brings with it a good amount of, you know, uncomposted material, but also a good many worms too. And we are starting to run a little bit low on space in this container here. So how about we just go ahead and leave it at that? I think that'll be a nice little addition to the outdoor worm bag version 5.0. At this point, I'm just going to look to level things off here. You know, I just spotted what appeared to be some activity over here, and I just can't seem to resist to grab at it. Get a few more recruits to join in the party. Now we got ourselves a pretty good collection to bring over into the new system. Well, not so new after it's been in service for over 100 days now. It's getting up there, but you know, I don't know, I guess relative to most worm bins going many hundreds of days, perhaps 104 days or whatever the age of that worm bag is not even all that much. So let's see. Hopefully we didn't lose too many worms fleeing the cardboard covering here due to the bright sunlight from overhead. I mean, I could see a couple of them here and there on the ground. Not many though. We'll just leave them be. They'll just find their way back into the system through the holes that are on the bottom, and they could squirm back in from below. So I'm going to move the camera over to the outdoor worm bag. We're going to feed them because I got some banana peels and some all kinds of like not newspaper, but paper towels, napkins, things like that that need to be composted along with the banana peels, and then we'll release our worms. So let's regroup over in the outdoor worm bag. So now this is 4 banana peels straight out of my freezer. Well, not straight out, they've been thawing here for a little while, so they're quite soft, perhaps not even frozen anymore, and a pretty large number of paper towels, quite a many of them. And here's the container that we're going to be feeding, the system that most people are expecting to see when I'm out here in my yard. Still see a little bit of light streaming in here from the side. That ain't going to last much longer, so we'll try to get this over and done with before the favorable light conditions start to fade. Now, many days of rain have passed. Definitely seeing the signs of that, not only in that little puddle that was sitting out on top, but also just the degree of moisture in the material around the sides. So now 12 days after feeding them what they got last time, which was potato peels and perhaps something else. For some reason the potato peels really stick out in my mind as the main thing that they were given. It might have been combined with some other sort of food as well, but offhand I just don't recall what that might have been. Maybe we'll see some leftovers and then we'll be reminded of what it was. The potato peels usually do get worked down to where it's really only the peel remaining anymore. Usually all the soft remaining potato that's still on the peel is what they were able to, you know, scrape off pretty quickly. So here's 1/2 of the mango seed that I placed in here once a while back. Here you could see the cut edge where I had sawed the mango seed in half. Last time we were in here, I did make a pretty valiant effort to try to locate the other one, because there's obviously the other half of that. Well, maybe not so obvious, but there is that other half of that one floating around in here someplace. And they're definitely making good progress. I mean, I did actually help tear it open like so, just to reveal the inside of the thing last time. But maybe before we drop in today's feeding and then release the worms that we recruited from the compost barrel, perhaps we can just do a quick tilling up of the material and probe around to see if we can find that other half of the mango seed. It will be kind of nice to reunite those two objects, and it would also be nice to see how the progress on that other one's doing, because it does seem like for a couple visits now we've only been managing to bump into one of the two halves. And I might not have been that thorough last time, but I am being pretty thorough now, or at least I feel like I'm being pretty thorough. Going pretty deep down, almost to the bottom or all the way to the bottom. Kind of scraping material from down there up and then rummaging through it to see what I can find. It's a pretty good size object, so if it does end up in my hand, it should be pretty obvious. I should be able to sense that I've bumped into it. But we've already made our way around, I think, at least halfway around, and I've still not yet encountered it. I was sort of suspecting that perhaps it was just out near the edges where I'm not sure we were so thoroughly looking last time. I believe we did pretty thoroughly excavate the feeding zone last time before plopping in their food. But I had this funny feeling that if we were to examine the outer perimeter of the container that we might actually end up finding that other half of the mango seed. But it is starting to feel to me like I've pretty much gone all the way around. I mean, you could definitely see the bottom of the container over there, right? All the way down there. That's the bottom of the bag. And I believe I have, managed to handle almost all of the material in this system, and it still seems to be eluding me somehow. Very unlikely, at least seems unlikely to me, that they would have actually broken something as tough as that down already by now. But maybe this one was just sort of positioned in a weird spot where it wasn't getting as much attention, and maybe the other one just happened to be in a hot spot where it did get a lot of attention, and perhaps it did get broken down already by now. I don't know why. That just seems so unlikely to me, but who knows. I suppose I'm just sort of grasping at straws now, trying to explain to myself why I'm not finding that other half of the mango seed. But I think after a fairly thorough search like we just conducted to try to find it, and we've only got the half that we've been bumping into regularly, I believe I'm prepared to just abandon the search and proceed with the matter at hand of just getting this system fed, backfilled, and then dump in the holdout worms that we just recruited from the compost barrel. It was like the stem of a banana. So, just interesting that we've been unable to locate that other half of the mango seed. I'm sure at some point in the future, when we're not even trying, it'll just surface, and there it'll be in our hot little hands. But today we're abandoning the search after definitely giving it a good try, because I think it's time to come in here with that nice big collection of not only the food but surplus bedding in the form of all these paper towels and napkins, or whatever they are. Some of them don't even look so heavily used. Some of them are clearly quite thoroughly used. And I don't want them to just be a big, huge mound or bundle of paper only. I do like the idea of somewhat spreading the material out and then spreading the food that I'm placing in on top of it around too, so that as the worms come for the yummy banana peel, they'll also encounter this supplementary bedding in the form of paper towels and napkins, and hopefully give all that stuff a good working over as well. So how many do we have here? I thought it was 4. Perhaps it's 5. No, I think it was 4. 4 banana peels spread out as evenly as I can over the paper towels that we bought out here to be composted down. And then I think we could just backfill, cover up the feeding area, level things off, and then finish off with the release of the worms that we recruited. So I'll be once again attempting to show these guys as best as I can on the camera, so that hopefully you'll get a look at that, my glove is broken already. These gloves are really very, very cheap. So maybe it would make sense to take some of this stuff that the worms have already evacuated due to it being exposed to the bright lights above. I mean, there's still a few worms in it here and there, but I would think that a lot of the stuff out on the very top surface has been evacuated. So we'll kind of spread that stuff out here across the top, and then we'll assume that a good number of the worms have made their way to the bottom here, so that as we flip the whole thing over, we'll get a good view of how many recruits we've assembled here. So please don't forget to leave me a quick comment. I really appreciate that. And as always, I'll be averaging everyone's estimates into the overall worm count estimate that we've got for the system, and then in a future check-in we'll review the updated estimated worm count for how many worms we believe live in this system. So they're definitely mingled in with the materials. They're kind of all over the place. But I don't think there's anything here that's going to impede their ability to just dive down and take cover from the daylight, what little of it remains. So let's just leave them to do just that, and then we'll be finished. Well, wouldn't you know it, my camera ran out of space, so I'm finishing this with my phone. It just happened to be on hand. And I know the phone's going to run out of space soon, so I better really quick say thank you. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. Don't forget to leave me your estimates, and we'll hopefully see you back here next time. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day. Bye now.